So, welcome at the open house day in Prague. I was asked to talk about the business model of SUSE. Actually, maybe I should introduce myself. My name is Vojtěch Pavlík. I've been with the company since '99, so that is a few years. And I'm the vice president of the Linux systems group today. So that's about 400 people that are doing all the Linux products for the company. Also the major source of revenue, with approximately now 75% of the company revenue is coming from Linux and related products. Actually, when SUSE was first created in, what was it, '93, I believe, the primary mission of the company was, well, it was not quite clear, but people were thinking maybe it's Linux, maybe it's open source, but, well, in reality it was making sure or showing the world that an open source company, open source business is actually viable, that it can sustain itself, that actually you can make a bit of money doing Linux, and for certainly enough to pay any employees that you might have. This is actually something that I think SUSE has succeeded in, with $575 million of revenue last year, and making a significant profit, EBITDA before taxes and loan repayments and so on, so operating profit. So that has worked out. Now the question is, how do we do that? Why would anybody pay for an open source product that amount of money? Well, the answer is it's not, well, obviously we have customers all around the world. Actually, I'm not going into much of the details in this presentation, but a majority of the largest companies, Fortune 500, are our customers and so on. So a lot of the really business critical operations are being run on SUSE. But let's start when it started. It started in '99, actually, surprisingly enough, the same year that I joined the company. When SUSE started going and hiring every Linux expert out there. There were actually not that many in that year yet, because Linux itself is from '93. And that created the SUSE Labs, actually. That's the SUSE Labs logo. You can see it's quite pixelated. Pixels were quite expensive in those years, so we only could use a few, so not much resolution. And that allowed the company to start providing what we call level 3 support. So level 1 support is when you call a support engineer and they ask you if you would like to turn your computer off and on again. Level 2 is if you actually have a real technical problem that somebody needs to go and think about and actually help you solve. And level 3 is when you reach a situation where where level 3 actually identified a bug in the code. So level 3 actually needs to start fixing the code. It's a part of engineering. So now we had that, and that allowed us to create a enterprise Linux. So the first enterprise Linux was actually created, I believe, a few years later. It was like 2000, 2001. It was created only for IBM Z series mainframe at that time, but that was the base of pretty much all of SUSE's business in the coming years. So how does that work? Obviously, the customers can't be paying for the code itself, because that's available as open source everywhere. Even we are making that code that we use to build our products fully available, right? There is open source, but even the official sources for SLAS are actually available. The tools that we use to build that code is available. Open Build Service is actually an open source project. The tools we use to test it are available because the OpenQA test harness is an open source project. So in theory, somebody can go and build it all themselves. But there are aspects that are not easily provided as a self-service. And the number one is support, right? So when exactly you have problems, as I described before, you need somebody that actually can solve them, that has that level of experience and insight in the code that they can just go and think about it and say, yeah, that's the problem, right? Either you are doing it actually wrong and you have used the wrong command to do something, or are having wrong expectations of what something does, or actually seeing that, yes, this is a bug and needs to be fixed. So the support is offered as a kind of an insurance model, where a customer is paying an annual fee, so every year is at an amount of dollars. And we say, okay, for that amount of money, if you pay it every year, if you actually hit a real problem, when really when your business is at risk by the operating system not running properly, we will not spare any effort to fix it. We will just go and fix it for you so that you can be back on your feet as soon as you can. But to be able to do that and to be able to promise the customer that we will actually fix everything that they can hit with the operating system, what we need is coverage. So we need to have people that understand every part of the operating system, and it's quite large. But then the question is, yeah, and that coverage needs to still be redundant. So, like if somebody goes on a vacation, we still have to be able to cover all the code base. So that's what we always internally have to calculate with how many people we have that know this part, because people know various areas in Linux and can back each other up in different ways. And so we always need to have a subset of people that can cover the whole thing. And for that, we need that expert knowledge. And that can only be obtained by actually really one way. And that way is, well, working with the code. If you are not working with the code on a daily basis, you don't have that knowledge. And while a super smart software engineer can actually go and learn the code and understand how it works and then fix any bug in Linux, because it's open source, so anybody can. The difference is that we have people that are working with it every day, so they immediately know their way around it and can actually react to that customer problem very quickly and fix it quickly. And so that is why we need to be developing our own products, that we can't just go and get, let's say, Debian and ship it to the customers and say, we do support it. We actually do need to continue developing our own OpenSUSE or SLES to actually keep our knowledge of it very intimate and very detailed. But that also then allows us, if we have that knowledge, that also allows us to participate in the upstream development. So we are encouraging our people very much to really get into those communities, go to conferences, become upstream maintainers of the project that the operating system is composed of. Because that then allows us to steer the direction of where the upstream projects go, and hopefully that will be then more in the direction that we need and our customers need for having a fully functional Linux operating system. And that helps us develop our products, and develop our products helps us do the support. So there the cycle is fully closed. So what is the code base? What is the size? We have some time ago, actually this is 2021, so this is about a year old. We have done an analysis of how much code actually is in SUSE Linux Enterprise. And this table shows on the horizontal axis the years, so from when to when a certain code base is under support. And on the x-axis, y-axis, it actually shows the lines of code of that code base. And service spec 2 of /15 has just reached 1 billion, so 10 to the 9 lines of code, which is pretty incredible. I think it's probably one of the largest software projects in the world. From what I know, even like the Google code base is somewhat smaller, and the Microsoft Windows code base is much smaller. So I've so far have not found anything of that size. Service Pack 3 is still a little bit larger. Now, if you count these lines here, this is the code bases that we are supporting concurrently, so at the same time. And that means that I think there's like 8 lines, so we certainly are maintaining more than like 5-6 billion lines of code and keeping that updated and keeping that in top-notch shape. So that's fun, and actually one of the business successes of SUSE is being able to do that with a fairly small number of engineers. Like I said, it's about 400, so just divide that number, the couple billion, by 400, and you can see how much is there for one engineer. But that is done mainly through automation, through really good processes, really good coding practices to make that possible. Now, why would anybody buy SUSE? It's not just support. Support is a key factor, and I'm saying this here. When a customer facing a problem can always call for help and get a response within SLA, so service level agreement. Within a certain time, somebody picks the phone up and can look into their problem. One thing that is unique when it comes to customers of SUSE is that we are offering what is called a PTF, problem temporary fix. So when a customer hits a problem, and this is something that our competition doesn't do, we actually create a fix that is specific to that customer and deliver it to the customer, now via their own repository, so they can just do an update and the system will install their specific update for just that problem, such that they can get up and running as soon as possible. And then we do additional QA in a lot more scenarios, and then we eventually release it to all customers as an update. And we are currently working with some analytics companies to validate that fully and to be able to actually say it in advertising materials. But so far we believe and have good reasons to believe that SUSE custom is actually rated as best in class by our customers. Now the next value where people are paying for Linux, although they can download it, is maintenance, and that is actually getting patches all the time, right? So having somebody look at all the upstream projects of which the code base is composed, seeing if there is anything important being put in that actually fixes an important bug or fixes a vulnerability, a CVE. And if yes, then actually packaging that up nicely into a patch that specifically patches that with as little as possible of system disruption. So that often means taking that patch and actually porting it to an older version of the package that we have in our system, then it's the newer upstream. Again, to minimize the level of disruption, because just moving to a newer version can cause trouble, like interfaces changing and so on. And so, yes, those fixes get very much tested before they get delivered. One thing that is also specific that you don't typically get with community distributions is live patching. So for very critical fixes like CVE, CVSS 7+, so very dangerous vulnerabilities or system stability fixes, we do provide live patches. So those you can actually install. It live patches the kernel, modifies the functions in the kernel without reboot, and the system can continue running, which significantly can improve the uptime of the system, because we allow live patches to be applied for up to a year before we actually need to reboot at all. One interesting thing that we have introduced with I believe, Service Pack 3 finally in full form, is that OpenSUSE is now a pretty much perfect counterpart to SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. SUSE Linux, also OpenSUSE 15.3 Leap, right? So the Leap is then based fully on the exact binary, same RPMs, same packages as the enterprise distribution. So if you're running Leap, you are actually running the identical stuff that the most business critical customers do. This is actually different from CentOS. CentOS is recompiled. Leap is really the same stuff. And so for people that want to first play with it and then potentially move to a fully supported state with contract and all that, there is a very straightforward path. Just change a few knobs and your Leap becomes aceless. One thing that why people are actually choosing a paid and enterprise grade business critical distribution is the life cycle. We are offering 13 years as a standard, plus more if you want like long-term support, extended long-term support, extreme long-term support, and so on, depending on how big your wallet is and how lazy you are to upgrade. And so that allows the system to run in long life deployments, like, for example, transportation, like trains. If you want to put an operating system into a locomotive, you are actually planning to keep it there for the lifetime of the locomotive. And that can be 25 years. And yes, we are able to do that and keep that system patched and supported the whole time. So that is something that you typically don't get with community releases, right? Where after a year or two, there is a newer version, and if you upgrade, you can be happy. But if you need to be stuck with a specific, certified, validated combination of the actual locomotive and the system, well, then the paid Linux is the only option. The next one is quality, and this is something that we do share because the binaries are the same for Leap, so this is something that you can get for free. But nevertheless, I should point it out that the life cycle of SUSE Linux Enterprise Server is approximately 1 year, right? So we are starting now, actually we've already started some months ago, working on the next version that we'll be releasing in a year from now. Slash 15 SP4 is just a few weeks before release. And SP5 will be about this time next year. And most of the year, we actually do not spend developing a huge amount of new stuff. That mostly comes from all the projects we pull in. We do like add hardware enablement and what else, but most of the time we spend actually making sure that it all works flawlessly. That's one of the, I would say, most beautiful drawbacks of open source. A huge amount of volunteers is relentlessly working on adding bugs to the code. So that means that with every release, we can invest in the effort and the work to make it pretty much flawless again, right? And so a company that does not have that skill and does not have that expertise can't compete easily, right? Because that year is needed. Because that code is supposed to be running in a bank or, I don't know, in a steel factory control center, and it's actually supposed not to crash ever. It still does, but extremely rarely, right? We have deployments where there are tens of thousands of servers. And yes, then you actually do see crashes, because if you multiply the period between crashes by, or actually divide that period by a factor of 10,000, well, then you can see something. But typically, when it's in single deployments, it's pretty flawless. And even like with the tens of thousands, it's like a couple times per year. So it is very little. The other thing is performance, right? So As, again, upstream works on adding bugs, no, actually improving features, the performance of the operating system decreases, it deteriorates, because you add a small additional here and actually don't think that in a case that the machine has 1,000 CPUs, that would actually cause a significant slowdown. So what SUSE then does, we are running our benchmarks. We have a bunch of machines that are doing nothing else year-round than running benchmarks, producing numbers, and showing us which changes actually did add or decrease the performance across a variety of machines. Adding support for newer machines and for more powerful CPUs typically does make the operating system slower on old CPUs. So it's always a matter of balance to make sure that the gains are there, but as little as possible of the drawbacks are there. So yes, that's the other thing. So in the end, you really get a business-critical Linux quality level of an operating system. And that's what we are pretty proud of. So the next thing is why we would need a paid-for Linux is security and compliance. So if you are working in a regulated market, let's say in a bank or in a government agency, then you need to have specific certifications. And one thing that SUSE has achieved, and so far no other general purpose operating system has achieved, is a common criteria EAL4 plus certification. What does that mean? Like EAL level 2 actually means that somebody looked at the code and said, yes, that's okay. EAL4 plus means that at every step there were reviews and the whole chain of custody is there for a fully managed code base. The plus actually means that it also has remediation of flaws. So there is a specific process what we do when a bug is found or when a CVE is found. So the whole thing with coordinated release schedules across multiple companies to fix a bug such that the bad guys don't get at the description before everybody is patched up and all that. There is a new certification from Google called SALSA, and we have self-certified at level 4, which required some changes, but not a huge amount because the EAL4 Plus was already covering most of it. It's also certified for American standards, FIPS encryption. There are standards on how to set up the operating system released by DISA. It has got hardening technologies for encapsulating applications. SE Linux is the more popular today, although it's much harder to use. AppArmor is more suitable for encapsulating workloads. But we have both, so there is the choice. So yes, as a result, if you are in a regulated market, banking, insurance, military, or any government agency, this really is a requirement, and this is something that you can't, again, get with a community release. And that's that. Thank you. If you